guys, the Curious Owl here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the final book in the main series of the Beautiful Creatures series, Beautiful Redemption by Garcia and Margaret Stohl. Like I said, this is the fourth and final book in the main series of the entire Beautiful Creatures world. There are several novellas and 2 spin-off novels that are involved in the world, but this is the last book in the original main series. So after sacrificing himself at the end of the 3rd book, Beautiful Chaos, Ethan has essentially reestablished the order of things. Things are starting to come back to normal, except for one thing. Ethan is now in what is considered the other world, or essentially the afterlife, as he is now dead, literally, to the world. Ethan doesn't believe that it's all that bad, as there are some nice things to being in the afterlife, but after finding out that that didn't have to happen, that he didn't have to die in order for things to go back to the way that they were before things got really messed up within this world, he starts to find a way to try to go back to Lena and get back to the mortal world so that he can continue to live his own life. But the problem is that this journey is incredibly dangerous and he cannot do it by himself, so he requests the help of several different individuals, alive and dead, in order to be able to get to where he needs to be to go back to the world where his friends and Lena lives. So since this is the very last book in the main series, I gotta say it was a very bittersweet ending for me, because the ending itself was really, really great. I really loved this story. I remember reading through this the first time when I had finished the series, and I had loved the ending of this book because I thought that it was a really great way to finish off the series and make things kind of come full circle. But at the same time, there were things at the end of this book that made me really sad, because there are certain events that happen and certain things that happen in order to get Ethan to come back to the mortal world that it just breaks your heart. And I don't want to say what it is because it ruins a lot of the story, but it just really made this story hit home, because it reminded me a lot of why I loved this series in the first place. And I'm glad that this book really just opened my eyes to understanding that my tastes have changed throughout this series, and that I still find a lot of appreciation for it because of the way that it has helped to shape my overall thinking and ideas and beliefs when it comes to young adult literature. The really big thing, though, that I realized when reading this book that really kind of made me a little angry is that there's a whole plot involving 2 characters named Abraham and Angelus that are not exactly minor characters, but they are essentially like the reason why things are so screwed up within this world, and there wasn't really ever a clear connection to these characters and why they were doing things the way they were. One of them kind of had a Voldemort scenario going on. Basically, this just connection between these 2 and the reasonings behind their mischief and the reason that they were trying to wipe out a lot of the casters in the first place was not really fleshed out, and I wish that it was, because I just still left this book feeling a little confused as to why things were the way they were and why there was so much of a problem with these 2 characters. I just really didn't feel like the bad guys of the story were really that fleshed out to where it would make sense within this world. Along with that, you don't really know what each person did within this plan. Like, what did Abraham do? You know some things about what he's done within this plan, but you don't know what exactly he contributed to it, if what he was doing in the background was actually contributing to the problem or to the plan that he had with this other character. And what did the other person do in this plan as well? Like, what did they end up doing that was causing a lot of problems themselves? It just didn't feel very fleshed out, and I wish it kind of was, because that way it would have made a lot more sense as to why Ethan ended up having to die in the first place, and why he has to get himself back to the mortal world at all. The one thing I really remember loving about this book, and actually did still love when I read it this time, is the fact that this book is actually split between Ethan and Lena. It is not even by any means. There's basically a part of Ethan, a part of Lena, and then another part of Ethan for the end of the story. But the part of Lena made sense, because there's a whole plot line with her that involves how Ethan is able to get back to the mortal world, and they have to go find something. She and everyone else that's involved with the story have to go find something in order to take it to Ethan to help him with his journey. So I really appreciated the fact that Garcia and Margaret Stohl really took the time to flesh out a little bit more of Lena's perspective on literally the entire thing, and then also seeing things from the alive side of the story and kind of figuring out how they even got the item in question that they needed for this journey, because it was going to be a very dangerous idea to do. And so I was really glad to see that they ended up fleshing out a little bit of Lena's side of the story, and also kind of giving some insight as to how the rest of the characters were feeling now that Ethan is gone. The thing that I also really loved about this story in general, the entire 4 main books of the series, is the relationship. It was messy in some points because of things that happened in the second book, Beautiful Darkness, dealing with Lena and her depression and her losing her uncle for a short spell. But overall, the relationship is honestly as true of a love as you could possibly find, because these characters have literally been meant for each other, and they were meant for each other centuries ago, but things had happened basically in a past life of theirs or to their ancestors that made it impossible for them to be able to be together. And so the fact that they have persevered throughout this entire series and have tried to make things work and have really found the reasons why they love each other throughout this entire series is absolutely beautiful. It is one of the reasons why I love this series so much, is because the relationship between Ethan and Lena has grown so much with each other and individually. And I feel like it's just become so much stronger despite all the adversity that these two characters have come across because of their relationship in the first place. Now, to go into some overall kind of series thoughts, since this is technically the end of the series here, overall, the character growth, I feel like Ethan grows very, very much as a person. He, in the beginning of the story, is a little bit more selfish. He kind of just wants to get away from Gatlin, South Carolina. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He kind of is a bit of a stuck-up kind of guy. He doesn't really see himself as the rest of the people. He kind of thinks of himself as above everyone. But when he meets Lena and he kind of gets to know her and kind of her life and the idea of the caster world, he kind of becomes more humble, and he becomes more compassionate, I think, for individuals, especially those that are within the caster world and those who are not within the caster world, because he just understands that everything is not in black and white, and that there's a lot of gray in the world. And I think that with that growth, he's really become a much better person. And just kind of seeing the story develop over the couple of years that it does over this series, and seeing Ethan grow and understanding kind of where he is in the world and what his purpose is in the world, really just makes it a lot more interesting to see him grow as a person, because you get to see him understand that, you know, things do not revolve around him, although in some cases they do within the story, but the majority of the time things do not revolve around him, and he has to put himself last in order to take care of the people he loves the most. As far as Lena's growth, she just becomes much more open about herself than she did in the first book. In the first book, she's very, very closed off. She doesn't want anyone to come near her because of her abilities, and the fact that she's shunned for the majority of the story in Gatlin is really hard on her. But when she becomes closer to Ethan and starts to really develop feelings for him and builds this relationship with him, she becomes more open about her powers and more open about her feelings and emotions, and her poetry grows over the course of this story. You see the poetry more so in this book, I think, than the other ones, but you see the growth in her writing because of the fact that she's grown as a person, and she has more things to say and is more open about saying them. Now, as far as the magic system and over the course of this series, a lot of it is lore building, and you learn a lot about, you know, the spells and what they do and kind of how the politics of the caster world works. Now, there's not a lot that's involved with Beautiful Redemption itself. There's not really any major changes, but there's a lot of lore that's built up as to why Ethan died and how he could come back, and what exactly Abraham Ravenwood was doing with another character in order to kind of make things more chaotic than they already were, and what the order of things did for them, and kind of a lot of the story was a lot of lore building, and I really enjoyed it because I feel like we've gotten a really good grasp of what the caster world is built on and what are some of the different things that are involved with it. There's not really a lot of description of the magic, except, you know, individual people have different abilities, and you learn a lot about them as you go, as you meet more characters and you start to see kind of different things from their points of view. But, you know, there's not really a whole lot of magic, or at least it's not any different in this book than it was in the other ones, which isn't exactly a bad thing, but to some people I can see why they would be like, I wish that there was more magic involved with it, I wish there was less lore involved. but I think the story focuses on lore and kind of takes the lore and incorporates it with the magic in order to kind of get characters to have different abilities and see kind of how every caster is different based on if they're light or dark or what kind of abilities they have. So overall, I ended up giving Beautiful Redemption, the final book in the Beautiful Creatures main series, a 4 out of 5 stars because, like I said, I feel like there was a lot of confusion with the character of Abraham and his role in a lot of the destruction of the order of things and another character and kind of what his purpose was. It was kind of described at the very end of the book what his purpose was and why he was doing things the way he was doing them. But it wasn't a whole heck of a lot to really get an idea of what was going on and why things were happening. So I wish that it was more fleshed out. But overall, I still really, really enjoyed it. This was still one of my favorite books in this series. I think if I'm to rate the 4 main books in the series, it would be Beautiful Chaos, Beautiful Creatures, Beautiful Redemption, and then Beautiful Darkness. I think that just the books themselves are still really good. They still live up a lot to what I had originally thought of them when I was in high school. And I don't really see a lot of the problems I remember hearing people have about this series. I think that it's a really good series, and I just really, really enjoy it. I think it's one that I would recommend a lot, especially to those of you who are getting into more magic-based, supernatural, urban fantasy kind of stuff. That is kind of what this book is about, is it's more kind of an urban fantasy kind of story. And I really, really enjoy it. I think it's still going to be one of my favorites 10 years from now. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this review of Beautiful Redemption and kind of the overall series of Beautiful Creatures. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. I will be reading more of the novellas and the 2 spin-off novels within this series, so don't worry, there will be more reviews coming about the other subsequent material of this series, but for now, the main series is done, which I am so happy to have finally finished. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys!